welcome back to the vlog. It is Wednesday afternoon. This week has flown by and I didn't do any work on the office on Monday because I needed a brain break. But yesterday I got back to it and I started working on a few things. The first thing I did, which you just saw, was cut down big panels for the countertop. So the way I've decided to do this is I'm going to cut the strips to size with a smidge of extra space for scribing along the back. And I've glued them together so it creates the thickness I want, which is about 1.5 inches, and sort of prevents it from bowing when I actually stretch it across the wall. The second thing I've been working on is creating a little scribe template along the back wall to mirror the curves of the wall, so I can bring that piece of wood out to the countertop I just built and use it as a stencil to trace that line and sand down the actual countertop so that it will match the wall as well. So let me show you the template and then we'll bring it out to the barn and see how smoothly this goes. To create this template, I just ripped down a little strip of 1/4 inch plywood that I had in the barn, and I put it up against the wall and did the scribing technique that I used for the base cabinet here and the leg over here. I just took a setup block that was about the depth of the widest gap. I put my pencil in the crevice and I ran it all the way along, putting pressure up against the wall, and that traced the variations in the wall right onto my template. Then I took a sander and I sanded down to my line, and that took a little bit of back and forth. I sanded and then I tested it, sanded a little more, tested it, and now you can see when I actually push this template up against the wall, there's little to no gap. Now, I'm not perfect, but I'd say this is pretty darn close, and we can make some fine-tuning adjustments on the actual countertop. But now I can take this piece, lay it on top of the countertop, and use that back edge to trace the same line, so I know when I slide the countertop in place, it will fit into the wall the same way. Now, normally I would do the same thing and create a little template piece on this left edge and on this right edge, but because this space is exactly 8 feet, I can't cut the wood down anymore, and I'm gonna try to get it to fit in there as perfect as possible. I may have to do a little shimming on this side, but I think we can hide that more easily because we'll have a cabinet above here. So it's more important to me that it's flush up against that wall, and we're gonna risk it and see how this goes. Last night you saw I glued this whole thing up and I clamped it overnight to make sure there weren't going to be any gaps between the two pieces of plywood. So I'm going to go ahead and remove all of the clamps and just make sure it all looks good. And then I'm going to take my template here and I'm going to clamp it to the back edge, and I'll use that to trace a line. Orange. Sorry about the weird lighting. I moved inside because it is disgustingly humid and hot outside, and I figured I would work smarter and not totally drain myself outside. So I hauled the big tabletop in and finished sanding in here. I think it's pretty close. I grabbed the template and just checked that I wasn't off on any of my edges, and everything seems good. I did sand down this back edge on all 3 sides, not the front. I left that completely flush, but I kind of like beveled it a little bit and rounded the corner so that that rough 90-degree edge doesn't catch on the drywall and damage it. There is a chance that I might catch the drywall. It's an easy fix, but anyway, I can minimize that. I will do my best. So that's why this edge is a little bit rounded over. Now we just cross our fingers and hope that it slides into place. Like I said, the distance between the walls is almost exactly 8 feet with like an extra 1/16, and this is 96 inches, so it should fit. I may have to like slide it out and just do a little like light sanding on some of the edges to get it into place, but fingers crossed this will go smoothly. So I'm oddly pretty calm right now. I was like previously stressed about this, but as I was cutting everything and gluing it up yesterday, I was like, worst case, we just lost a sheet of plywood. No big deal. No big deal. So let's see if this fits. We did it. This actually fit. I just keep surprising myself. Who am I? Look what we can do. Look what we can do when we plan and we try and we have a good mindset. I am so flipping proud of myself. Every single step of this project, I have proved to myself that I'm capable of more than I thought, and I cannot tell you how cool that feels. This is awesome. It's actually like officially looking like a desk. Obviously, we still have to do the other side of the L, but now we have a good system. We know what we need to do. The real question is it level? This edge I was not worried about because the cabinet is going to completely cover that and it will come to about here. So this edge is actually touching the wall. So that we don't have to worry about. For the most part, it's pretty tight up against the back. There's a slight little gap right there. And then there's a slight gap over here in the corner. So I must have miscalculated a little bit, but honestly, I'm not that worried about it. It's so small, I will probably just run a really thin bead of caulk along there before we actually get to painting, but check this out. You guys, this is starting to look like a real desk, which is amazing. Hello again, happy Friday. We are out in the barn. It is hot and humid, but I just have one sheet of plywood I need to rip down for this last section of desktop so I can glue up the two pieces overnight. I already have a strip that's pretty close to the width I need, so it's a manageable size to run through the table saw. Then I need to measure and cut the board in half. I'm going to attempt to do it on the miter saw. It's not really the right way to do it, but it's quicker, and I think if they're off the tiniest bit, I can sand them down. So we're gonna risk it for the biscuit and see what happens. Alrighty, so I ended up dry fitting the first piece I cut just to make sure it fit before I cut the second. And then I did the same process I did for the other strip of countertop where I laid the first one down. I used a tack cloth to remove all of the dust. I squeezed a whole bunch of wood glue on top, and then I laid the second piece, made sure it was flush on all the edges, and clamped it. So this will sit overnight, should be dry by tomorrow, so we can scribe the back edge and sand that down and then make sure it fits in place. I forgot it was supposed to rain today, and I watered all of the flowers earlier today because they were just looking so sad. It has been super hot and I don't have irrigation in the flower beds on the side of the house or in the front of the house. So I only water when I remember, which is not as frequently as I should be. So I'm very happy that rain came, but I feel disgusting. The humidity is insane right now. I was just straight up dripping sweat in the barn, and I was out there for like 40 minutes or less, and I just felt like I was wearing the humidity on my skin. So I'm gonna take a shower, clean up, and then Matt and I are gonna run some errands, and then I'm gonna come home and post up and try to catch up on women's gymnastics because I missed last night, and I've been avoiding social media because I don't want to know the results. So I need to catch up so I can come back to reality. Tomorrow we will get back to work on the countertop install, and as long as everything goes smoothly, fingers crossed, we might be able to wrap that up tomorrow. Good morning, happy Saturday. I just finished making up a taco dip for a get-together we are going to later today. It is a crowd favorite. I make it all the time and it's so easy to make. It's just refried beans, guacamole, sour cream and mayonnaise mixed together, shredded cheese, tomatoes, green onions, and sometimes people like to add black olives. I don't. You can also add ground beef with taco seasoning if you want to spice it up a little bit. Or anything else that you fancy. I just pair it with tortilla chips and it's the perfect dip. So now that that's done, we are back at the countertop. I'm gonna go check on my glue up, make sure that went well overnight. I will take all the clamps off. Then I'm going to bring it inside here and we will scribe it. Then I'll work on sanding that back line down so it fits up against the wall nice and snug. Once it's all fit in place, I'm going to drill the pocket holes and we're gonna attempt to assemble it. My dad texted me earlier this week with some thoughts on how to join the two pieces of countertop, and I'm going to acknowledge right now that he is probably right. He said to route out an edge on both pieces where they join and then like glue a piece of hardwood in there to prevent it from bowing. But if I'm being honest, I just don't feel like doing that, even though he's probably right. So for now, we're gonna go with the pocket hole screws. We'll see how everything pans out. If I need to add like some straps or do some really awkward under the counter routing later on in the future, I will figure that out, but I'm gonna risk it. I think it'll be okay. It's such a short stretch of countertop. It's only like 30 inches and it's got support on the right edge and the back edge. So there's just a really small portion that we're kind of like connecting to the longer piece of countertop. The other thing I might end up adding later on is a skirt, and I'll show you what that looks like on the dining room table here. So you've got your tabletop, but then they've got this piece here. On our dining room table, we actually have a drawer, which is something I'm considering, but I can always add that at a later time. For now, I'm just gonna work on the countertop, and then I can kind of decide if I wanna add this at a later point. Because this is a taller piece, it will allow us to hide anything underneath that might be like securing those two pieces of countertop together. much more smoothly than I expected it to go. Like I said before, we will see how those pocket screws do over time. I wouldn't stand on the desk on that seam, but I think putting a laptop on it or whatever will be just fine. Once I decide later on if I'm going to add a skirt underneath, then I can reinforce that seam accordingly. But either way, we are continuing to move forward. I'm going to wrap up here for this week. It still needs to be secured, as does the cabinet over here, but I'm still just kind of figuring out a few things before I lock everything in place. And then next week we'll get everything screwed down and cut up the wood to start building the cabinets and shelves above. So, as always, thank you so much for watching this week. If you liked the video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for future updates. If you have any questions, make sure to drop a comment below and check the description for links. I will catch up with you again next week.